Welcome to the Retirement Lifestyle Show. I am your co-host, Roshan Loungani. I've got with me, as always, Adrian Nicholson and Erik Olson. Adrian, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Roshan. Happy to be here. Everything's been solid on my end. Ready to dive into another podcast today. Erik, how are you doing right now?
I'm doing really well, and partly that's because I'm a Padres fan. So this is the year for Slam Diego. It just seems like it is wouldn't you know, the Dodgers are going to be, playing over 700 ball in the year that the Padres have their best year. And even though now the Padres have the second best record in baseball there, I think they're trailing the Dodgers by 4 or 5 games. So second best record in the National League. But as a San Diego Padre fan, I have to say it is a lot of fun. Talk about their historic pattern, lots of great pitching, not lots of great hitting. And now this year pitching's okay, but the hitting is unbelievable.
Yeah, that is great to hear. Glad you're really excited about that, Erik. Roshan, have you seen anything interesting lately that you think our listeners like to hear, or me and Erik will find interesting?
Yeah, you know what? I was actually, I have an article that I just had to talk to Erik about because it actually flowed. Erik is probably on my level, maybe higher as the most frugal person I know.
Okay.
Right? So we definitely connect on that level. So I saw this, and this may be for my entertainment. For our listeners, this is supposed to be our first episode on YouTube, so you can see his reactions as well if you want to watch it. But have either of you got, I love bringing in just celebrity sports, that kind of news when it crosses over into finance, but have any of you heard that Dr. Dre, hip-hop mogul and the creator of Beats headphones, is getting divorced from his wife? Have you heard about this at all, either of you?
No.
Erik, I'm going to ask you, how much do you think she wants him to pay him per month in spousal support?
Oh, so I don't know how much he's worth, but I'm gonna say he's worth several hundreds of millions. Mm-hmm. And so I'm gonna say, if she's looking at me, so she doesn't want. Oh, she probably wants not only half of what he's got, but then wants maintenance. Wow, based on the way you set that up, I'm going to say, I'm going to go big. I'm going to say she wants $500,000 a month.
Big number, Erik. She wants 4 times that.
What?
$2 million a month. Now, the reason I brought this up, though, was not just the amount she's asking for, but I found even more interesting, there's a breakdown of what she is asking for. Okay. And I just wanted to throw some of these numbers out to you and just get your reaction on there. So I won't go through all the list, just a couple of them that stand out to me. So she needs money for entertainment every month.
Oh, really?
How much do you think she needs for entertainment every month?
Of
that $2 million. Of that $2 million, how much is going to entertainment?
$100,000.
$900,000 a month.
Wow.
How do you possibly do that?
How boring is her life?
I mean, she must be planning on going on a lot of places and just really taking some time to really entertain herself, it seems like.
Where is she going? You can't go anywhere right now.
First off, first class flights, I don't know how you burn. So that's a $30,000 a day budget if I'm doing the math right. And so you got, if you do $30,000 a day, how many what hotel is going to charge you that? What first class air ticket's going to cost you that? Even if you get bottle service, you
could buy places instead of like bottles. But I won't go through all of them, but one more stands out that I just don't know how you spend this much. But for her telephone, cell phone, and email services, I have unlimited everything for 4 phones, and I pay about $200 a month. I think it may be $250. Uh-huh. She wants $20,000 a month for telephone, cell phone, and email. How many email accounts does she have, or cell phones, or whatever?
She has 99 families that she wants to help out.
Okay. So even with 99 families, $200, I guess 99 families. But you know what? She notes charity separately at $125,000 a month. Glad she's giving to charity.
Wow.
Not bad. But I just thought, and anyone that saw this on YouTube, Erik literally slid his chair back with the number. All right. Anyway, let's get us back to our topic of the day today. So Adrian, what do you have in store for us today?
Yes, for the listeners today, we're going to go over buying a car, a big purchase that people normally consider. That's going to be, really important when it comes to financing, how you pay for it, whether it's going to be new or used, some of the attributes that you look into it, and a lot goes into this decision. And we're going to start off first with determining what you need and some of the attributes and what you look for. Roshan, what do you want to start us off with this?
Well, so this varies by individual. I feel like we say that in every podcast we record. But what I have heard some people say recently, and this is someone that I work with that wants a new car, every few years. So not someone who's buying it only for a long time. But part of his argument is that the technology changes so frequently that he just wants the best in technology. So that's one thing that I just have heard recently. Something that's not as recent, but you hear all the time. And there are some definitely upgrades with technology on this, but the safety features. So I recently had a couple clients that were looking at a car and they wanted to make sure they had that system where they tell you if you're drifting lanes or if there's a car on either side of you when you're merging. So there's definitely been advances in technology that people are looking for in their cars.
Yeah, 100% agree with the technology part. I mean, cars are becoming more and more equipped where they want you to feel like you're in your home nowadays with all these new cars that are coming out, that's for sure. Erik, how about you? What do you want to kind of address or comment on what Roshan had to say with this part?
Well, I guess I want to start with more just the reason why are we even talking about this? I mean, if you have, we're talking, a lot of our clients are well resourced, let's put it that way. And so for them, the question of fine tuning the purchase of a car isn't really a big issue, but we also have a fair number of our clients where they're very comfortable. They have good base of wealth, good income. Their projections look great in retirement, but oftentimes one of the things is that they'll overlook in their thinking about their financial plan is that they don't have a car payment right now, or maybe they do, but they don't. When you start thinking about some of these decisions, if let's say you're spending as a household, after the purchase and then subtracting whatever trade-in value, let's say you're spending $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 a decade, and you do that for a few decades, it starts to be a material consideration in your overall budget. And some households will go more than that. So I guess I want to just say, we think this is an important topic, not just because we happen to be interested car guys and because we're frugal, although we are, but it's also, I think, because we recognize that getting this right can mean a lot of other choices you free up a lot of cash for other choices in your life.
Yeah, I mean, it's next to your house. Car purchases are probably the second biggest thing, right? Mm-hmm. People are making. So it's definitely an important decision. I was thinking when we started with this topic that for me, it's just to efficiently use your money, right? In general, with the car, and we're going to touch on this with some of the options. So just making sure you use your money efficiently, but at the same time, this is one of those things where you'd have to make some pretty horrible car decisions for it to be life changing. The buying car process for you. So I think this is one of those things that can incrementally be helpful, but it's not going to change your life. You're not going to reach your retirement because you made the right car purchases along the way.
Yeah, great point. Great point. You definitely want to do a research on this purchase. Like you said, this is a second big purchase going along with a home, and it's extremely important to look at all the attributes, making sure you're getting the most out of your money, and you're also buying something that's not only reliable, but something that, sometimes they say something that can fit your ego as well as another layer of this that's important to people. Erik, did you want to add something to that too?
Well, I guess it's in terms of motivations, the psychological motivations for this purchase or that. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Yeah, I think it varies so much from person to person that, I guess I would say you have to assess your needs, and one of those needs may be sort of the flash factor. And so if that's what satisfies you and you can afford it, go for it. But
yeah, and that's where I think adding it to your plan is helpful, right? Because if you want the flash factor and you can afford it, go for it. But if you want it and it means you got to work for 5 more years, you got to make a decision, right, at that point. So I think it impacts it. Let's start with the one piece of buying new versus used. I know you're passionate on this one, Erik, so I'll let you start us off.
Okay, well, so I'm gonna first of all, I don't deny that there is something special about that new car smell, and we did on one occasion buy a new car, and so I'm not going to say I'm adamantly anti new car. Having said that, I think it's also important to understand the price dynamics of new versus used pricing, and so. If in general you say in the first year, driving that car off the lot is where you're going to get the biggest price hit, then it seems to me that if you're thinking in terms of how can I get close to a new car, then but not have to suffer that initial depreciation, you might want to shop around for year-old cars. I saw one study that Edmunds.com did, and I'll talk about several websites a little bit later in this podcast, but Edmunds.com has a lot of interesting research on it. One of their studies showed a Ford F-150. I believe that's the most, that's the single vehicle that has the highest sales in the United States, or pretty close to it, even more than some of the sedans. I think for a long, long time it was the Accord versus the Camry, but I think it's the Ford F-150. It's the biggest seller. The approximate new price on that, according to this one study, was about $50,000. But if you'd wait a year, you could buy it in the high 30s, mid to high 30s. So you would see roughly a 25% savings. I'm just going super round numbers here. If you just could wait a year to have that same F-150.
Yeah,
so,
and actually, and I saw a similar thing, Erik, on NerdWallet, where they said that. And the common thing I've always heard, I'm sure you've heard this similar, is the moment you drive it off the lot, it loses 20%. And what they took it a step further and said, that's true, but you also have to note that at the end of the first year, when you consider the mileage, wear, and tear, you could lose 30%. And interestingly, your number on the Ford F-150 lines up pretty much to that same data that you'd lose a third of the value of the entire car in a year.
Yeah. And what's more is then the second year, maybe you, according to this study, and we'll talk about assumptions that I use in planning maybe a little bit later, but the second year for this same Ford F-150 was close to another 7% decline. The third year was close to another 5% decline in that neighborhood. So, however, after the fourth year, some vehicles go off, some of the warranted elements drop off. And so since now you lose some of those warranty protections, there's another notch down, and then it sort of flattens after that point. So you could say you'll wait until after the fourth year and wait until that next notch down has occurred for you, if the warranty isn't that big a deal to you and you can find a nice low mileage car. Or you might want to instead say, no, I'm going to look to buy somewhere right after that first year and then get rid of it just before, if you're a high frequency car owner, get rid of it before the next notch down 3 years later. So you own from year 1 to 4, and in that phase, your car depreciation, you balance a relatively lower depreciation than would be true with a new car, with a near new car experience.
Well, are you, Erik, that although I think numerically and theoretically that could work, do you know people who actually trade cars frequently enough, buying a year 2 old car and selling it before year 3 or year 4, when the next drop is? Have you seen that? I've never seen someone do that before.
Yeah, so I've seen not that particular pattern. What I've instead seen people say, hey, I'm going to lease a car.
Yep.
And I'm going to own it for 3 years, then I'm going to go replace it with the next lease car. And so we'll come to leasing versus buying in just a few minutes. But anyway, I'm going to advocate for most people, unless you're going to buy it and you're going to hold it forever, and you're not that concerned about the depreciation, to consider buying it no earlier than after about a year. Get that initial depreciation knocked out, and then you can hold it for a long time, as opposed to flipping it in 3 years.
Yeah, and what you just described tends to be what I see. I'll see people that typically buy cars and keep them for a long time, 10 years or so, let's say. Or I see people who every 3 years want to get another car, right? Although this buying it year one and selling it year three is not something I had personally, not only have not seen it, or I'd never heard of that one before, but it seems like a pretty good strategy. I just feel like those two camps, like the one who wants a new car every 3 years, they're not going to wait to get a year-old car and trade it every 3 years. And the ones that want a car for forever, so to speak, they're probably not going to do that 3-year trade-in either.
Yeah, great point. And the depreciation aspect of this is extremely important because, again, this is a big purchase that depreciates in value. So that's why just considering the lifetime of the car, and if it's a new car, as soon as you drive it off the lot, next 3 months it's considered a used car. So it's a really important element, especially when you're using your savings, and depending on where you are with your financial goals, is something to really consider when you're making this type of investment. I think it's extremely important for our listeners to consider. We can move on to the next part. I think is a very important part, and Erik touched on this a little bit, buying versus leasing. Roshan, where do you kind of stand on this?
Well, so in general, I probably should have said this at the beginning of the previous segment. In general, I would say if you're a buyer, you get a car that's at least a year old. If you're going to sort of buy and hold forever, that's the optimal financial move. Now, if you want a new car, as Erik, as you had said, it's not like it's a bad thing to get a new car. Just I think you need to be aware of that depreciation and that loss and say, is it worth it for you? But in general, if you're buying, get a used car that's a year old plus to avoid that depreciation. And then if you are leasing, typically the only place where I think that really seems to be a good move is if you're a business owner, if you're able to deduct it, right? That's where I can see it as being a potentially a good move. I've heard people argue that that when you're an advantage to leasing is you never take that depreciation hit. But if you're buying a car that's a year old, you're never taking it anyway. So that one argument to me is out the window. So with buying versus leasing, I tend to lean towards buying. And then if you add on to the fact how low interest rates are now and the fact that you can even get zero, I feel like getting 0% on cars has almost been there all the time for the last 20 years with, short time frames in between where instead of 0%, you're getting like 2%. So interest rates tend to be low on buying, which is another argument against leasing, right? In buying, the bottom line is you build equity and there's a point where you will not have a payment if you keep it once it's paid off. Whereas leasing, you're constantly going to have a payment. You're constantly going to, quote unquote, rent your car. And if you're not getting a tax deduction, or you're not a person that is that has to, for whatever reason, get a new car every 3 years, I just really can't see a great argument for leasing.
Yeah, I think the point that you made about business owners, if a business has exclusively, at least this is what the tax code says, is if the car is used exclusively for business use, then it's a deductible lease expense. And so the after-tax cost of that lease can be attractive. It absolutely can be attractive. But having said that, I guess I would agree with what you've said, that if buy versus lease. Now, there is one other option that's sort of a hybrid model of those two. And it is, and not every manufacturer offers it, but a few do. And that's something variously known as a SmartLease or something else like that. What it is it's a contract to buy that's lease-like for the first few years, and it's a contract with an option to buy, I guess I would say, after X number of years, typically 3 years. The reason if you're really thinking about going that route, that you might want to the leasing route, where you might want to look at this instead, is that when you lease a car, you are paying, at least in the state of Illinois, and I think this is true throughout the United States, you pay all of the sales tax on the entire vehicle that's built into the lease calculation, even though it's anticipated that after 3 years, you're going to be turning back a vehicle to the company from which you lease the car with some amount of residual value. In other words, you from the get-go weren't expecting that you were buying that part of the car. Let's just to make it simple, a $25,000 car today that you're going to hand back 3 years from now that'll be deemed to be at that point in time half that value, $12,500. Really, your plan all along was only to use $12,500 of the value of that car, but you'll pay sales tax on the entire $25,000. So if you go this SmartLease route, then instead what you're doing is you're paying the sales tax once on that entire $25,000, and then 3 years out, you can evaluate whether or not you indeed want to do a buyout and get that last $25,000 or $12,500 of car, but you won't have to pay sales taxes on that part again. So in that sense, just that if you're in a high sales tax state, looking at this option might be an attractive way to go.
That could be definitely a good move with leasing.
Mm-hmm.
The smart lease, when you first started that, because I haven't really seen many of these smart leases, but when you first started that, I thought, well, don't all leases give you the option to buy at the end? But this one will give you the added savings, tax savings.
Right. They do give you the option to buy again, but my understanding is on the lease version, then you'll pay sales tax again on the residual value.
But the smart lease, you only pay it once.
You did, exactly. And so go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say there's one other that we won't really spend too much time on today, or any time on really. I just thought it'd be worth mentioning it. But a few years ago, they started these car subscription services. Are you familiar with that at all, Eric?
No.
Adrian? No. So you know why you're not familiar with it? Because it's really expensive and probably doesn't make sense for anyone, but I just thought it's worth noting.
Okay.
Unless you're the person who wants to spend extra, like wants to constantly switch cars. But it's a subscription service where you pay the monthly fee, you get a car from that manufacturer, and with a little bit of notice, you can switch cars. You don't have to wait 3 years. You can say, hey, I don't like this car, and a few weeks or months down the road, just switch it out. So like BMW has it, Audi has it, Volvo has it, Mercedes-Benz. I'll just use an example because they list the most types, but Cadillac has one that's $1,800 a month. And you can rotate between 6 different models that they have, and it includes everything, insurance and so on's included as well. But the number's just so high that I think for the I wouldn't be surprised if most of the people I work with haven't even heard of this service. I think I just caught an article on it on CNBC or something a few years ago, and thought it'd be worth mentioning today. While we're on here.
Okay, if we're talking about options, I'll mention one other that actually blends our first two topics, which is new versus used and lease versus buy. And that is if you're one who really does care about some measure of guarantees or some sort of warranty backing the vehicle, but you do like the idea of a lease or this smart lease approach that I mentioned, you could look for a vehicle that's known as a certified pre-owned vehicle. And that vehicle typically is it's a 3-year-old vehicle typically that's just come off of the original lease, and now still the company is willing to get behind, the manufacturer is willing to get behind with a warranty. And oftentimes, if you're buying that vehicle, you have to get a CPO or certified pre-owned, you have to buy from the same manufacturer. A Honda CPO from a Honda dealership or a BMW CPO from a BMW dealership. But then you can do a smart lease version or a lease on that vehicle. And so now you've avoided a lot of the depreciation and you have some of these other options built in.
Yeah, interesting. I've definitely seen the certified pre-owns, and I've noticed that the certified pre-owned vehicles tend to cost a lot more, than the same vehicle without that certification.
Right. Yes.
So personally, I've never bought that. I also know you can, if this is something you're looking into, you can look at the certified pre-owned vehicle and compare that with the used vehicle and purchasing your own warranty.
Right.
But once again, in my personal car buying habits, I've decided to forego the warranty or the certified pre-owned just to get the cheaper vehicle.
Yeah, the frugal approach.
Yes.
I mean, price is always a factor when it comes in buying cars, and now also the different elements and layers when it comes to leasing. It shows how much you need to research. And again, it all comes down to the type of person you are, the type of car that you want, how long you plan on owning it. Is it something that, you're always big on having the latest and greatest, or are you looking for something that's, within your budget and something that's reliable that'll get you to point A to point B? And another element and another thing that we need to add on to is the aspect of whether you should pay in cash or finance is another big decision. I kind of have an idea where we will go with this, but we should definitely touch on maybe the pros and cons on both paying in cash and finance. Erik, do you want to start us off in this area?
Well, we're in a super low interest rate environment, so the common, and I think the primary argument that most people will make about on this question is that if you can pay cash and not finance, then in a high interest rate environment, you're doing yourself a favor because you're avoiding a lot of interest cost on that car. And in a low interest rate or zero interest rate environment for purchasing these vehicles, then especially on the new side, then it's a little bit harder argument to make. The thing that I think is a primary argument is the one of just in general, our eyes are a little bigger. No, sometimes our aspirations are a little bigger than our budget can accommodate. And so following a discipline of saving for a vehicle puts you in a position to really calibrate whether or not the purchase that you're intending to make really works with the rest of it. I mean, you're saving for your retirement, you're saving for college, you're saving for these other large ticket items. And then once those are saved for, you may find that you don't quite have as much free cash flow as you thought you would, or that the dealership could talk you into, or something like that. So saving for it puts you in a position to say, I know I have this much money and it is reserved for this purpose, and now I can go make a purchase with cash on the barrelhead. And if you then say, well, they're offering zero, you might just then, store the cash in an account that's reserved exclusively for paying down, and you can earn a little interest on that as you're paying down that car. But nonetheless, if you can start with enough money in the bank to buy that car, I think you're better off.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, Erik. And you brought up a good point that interest rates are extremely important because, again, we said this is a depreciating asset. Mm-hmm. And if you're also paying a great amount of interest too, it's kind of like you're losing in both directions as well. Mm-hmm. And you're really, dipping into that emergency fund as well. I think it's important. Roshan, do you want to comment on that as well?
Yeah, Erik, I completely agree with you that you should be saving for a car and having the cash available to then make a decision with the market environment. Mm-hmm. I also will note for people, when people are making a decision, a financial decision, and they're looking at what they can afford by payment versus what you can afford in a lump sum, you approach that decision very differently.
So true.
Right. So I think to make sure that you make the best financial decision, have that account you're saving money in to pay off the car. Then let's just say you've got $20,000 in there and you go to the car dealership and you look for a $20,000 car that you can afford. At that point, you make your decision, do I finance or pay it off? Right. But it's very different from going into the car dealership today and saying, well, I have no money to pay it in cash, but hey, the interest rates are low, so I'm just going to finance it, versus leaving the dealership and saying, well, that's the car I want, now I got to save for it.
Yeah.
So,
I think the point you're making is a really good one. The metrics that people use vary from person to person. Some people are really driven by, well, what's the down payment? And others are really driven by, well, what's the monthly payment? And others are driven by, what's the interest rate, and others, what's the total cost of the car? And I would say that my view is you ought to start with the total cost of the car, And then the other variables can fall into place, because really a sales strategy is to say, hey, well, if we can get you a lower payment, do we have a deal? And
yes.
the lower payment might be the number of months that you're paying on that vehicle, or it might be, that they are able to find a slightly lower interest rate with some finance company that's available. But it's start with the total cost of the vehicle, the sticker price, and work from there the rest of the deal.
Yeah, I've had a conversation like that. I don't know if you've had the same feeling, but the car buying process to me has felt like very antagonistic.
Mm-hmm.
When I'm with the dealer, and almost like a zero-sum game that they're trying to win and make me lose, as opposed to going both ways. So if you approach it with knowing what you want and what you're looking for. And we had one car buying process about 8 years ago that was just so terrible that the last 2 times I've just gone to Costco and used their car price, and I've gone to TrueCar and used their car price, and just taken that to the dealer, right? So that I knew what I could afford, I knew what I wanted to buy, and I knew what it should pay. So then I just didn't want to deal with the whole negotiation process. Like the constant, I have to go see my manager about nothing and come back to talk to you type thing. So one other thing worth noting, I just ran a number on here. When you talk about financing versus paying it in full, we mentioned low interest rates. So if you can get a low to no interest rate, that makes sense. Versus if the interest rates are high, then yeah, definitely paying cash. But I just did the math. If you took a car and you're financing a car for $20,000 and you're paying 2% interest, I picked that because I think that's a rate people can get right now. Well, at the end of and I put a 5-year, let's say it's a 5-year loan because that's the most common one. At the end of 5 years at 2%, you're paying $1,000 in interest. Right. So, and I bring that number up because I don't really see this as a major loss in either direction. So let's say you have the $20,000 in the bank and you say, well, I'm going to finance it and invest the money. Yeah, you can definitely make more, and over 5 years your $20,000 will grow to a higher number. But it's not huge. Or if you're someone who says, well, I don't want the payment, well, then you're going to end up paying it off and saving yourselves that $1,000 in interest over 5 years. Now, granted, the 6% interest it's going to compound, and it's $1,200 in just the first year. But what you earn in the market, that 6% number I'm using, is uncertain. It's not guaranteed. What you can save on interest is a guaranteed number. So I think you've got to take that into account as well.
So. And just on the interest rates, and you mentioned that, I think it's useful to remind people, you can shop for interest rates before you shop for the car.
Yes.
And get pre-approved with a lender so that you can walk into, to approach a seller who is willing to do financing and say, here, I already have this offer in hand. Do you have a financing offer that will beat it, an interest rate that will beat it? If you don't have that in hand, you come in, first of all, less knowledgeably, and you have less of a negotiation edge on the interest rate. In addition to, of course, we've already talked about getting the price of the vehicle right, but also you want to get the price of the interest. If you're going to finance, you want to get that right.
Yeah, and if you walk into some of these independent dealers, they'll give you a different price if you have your financing or cash versus if you're financing through them. So just walking in with your own financing, at least knowing what that is, may actually give you a lower sticker price from some of these places. I don't know if that happens all the time. I just know that that's happened to me a couple times. Yeah.
Yes, all great tips, and it really shows how you have to do your research, shop around, and bust out the financial calculator sometimes to really see what the best course of action is all really great. Now we're going to move on to high impact life. Erik's got some another great topic for us to discuss today and for our listeners to hear.
Well, actually, before you start, Erik, I've got to share a story about Erik for our listeners. Erik and I, this is, I think, the second or third time we met in person. and we are going to a company conference, and the way our company conferences work is we pay for the airfare and the hotel, and then everything's covered when you get there. Everything else is covered. So Erik and I trade emails before this conference because we are both frugal, as I mentioned.
Yes.
And we don't want to pay the $500 a night hotel room rates.
No.
So Erik says, I found a great...
to me.
So Erik says, you know what? I found a great place. And he drove down there instead of flying. So he goes, I found a great place. I'm driving my car. Just get a room where I'm staying at. And the hotel room was terrible, but that's a different story. So Erik picks me up, and we're driving to our hotel, and I go, Erik, this is a great car. He's driving it was a nice Honda Accord sedan. He just got it, and I had just gotten a car. So I was thinking, hey, I got a great deal on my car, and here's what I did. I searched for the cheapest thing within a 100-mile radius based on mileage, years, and so on and so forth. And I'm thinking I have this great get a deal on a car strategy. Erik goes, yeah, that's interesting. I ran a regression analysis to find the cheapest car within a 300-mile radius, and that's what I got. And what I thought was I'm better at buying cars than you or more frugal than you story turned into Erik just stomping on my my energy. So that's when I knew we'd get along as well as we have.
Okay, so sometime I want to do a bonus episode on using linear regression analysis to select your car, because I think I have a couple of clients who are the scientists, chemists, the mathematician types who would absolutely love it, and we'll just warn people in advance that you don't need to do this at home. Kids, don't try this at home. Yeah, that was fun, and I did the same things later, Roshan, with my wife's car. Looked all over the country and picked up a vehicle, flew out to Boston on a one-way ticket, and then took regional buses out to this place in Rhode Island, and came back with a vehicle for her that I had found using that approach. So it's a lot of fun.
Best deal in the country. And I'm sorry to interrupt, but now Erik, please pick it up with High Impact Life.
All right. Well, so one of the things that has been a big passion of mine that I've mentioned in previous podcasts has been the area of working in prisons, and or what I would characterize as getting in and it's connecting with men, and for that matter women, who are long term behind bars. And so, and the reason I bring this up as part of this retirement lifestyle podcast is just in terms of speaking for myself. I would say this has probably been one of the most significant areas of personal growth. I know that I was approaching this initially selfishly, but in terms of one way in which I've grown the most, and the initial invitation to come be part of something like this was extended by a friend of mine to a group of about 6 to 8 guys that he also knew. And I think actually we had 10 guys that went. And for every one of us but this one, this was a first time. And I would say, first of all, one principle that's here is if you're really passionate about something, whether or not it's working in prisons or connecting with people behind bars, is there's a tremendous power in grabbing someone by the arm and saying, "Come with me. Come try this with me," and engaging people in some new areas that will seem perhaps a little outside the box, a little extreme. I would say most of the 9 guys that time went in with some degree of presuppositions about what they were going to experience. And most of them were, I would say, caricatures or stereotypes that were, for the most part, not warranted. Because I think, you see movies and television shows and you reach certain conclusions. What I would say is some of the most extraordinary times of connecting with other human beings, honestly, have been behind bars. And so what I'm going to encourage you to do is look around for ways that, in terms of your community or in your state. And in my case, it's a group of guys that will twice a year try to visit every single one of the 26 state prisons in the state of Illinois. So medium, maximum, and minimum security prisons. And it's not the same 10 guys, by the way. It's a big group of guys. But there are some of these guys that will do this almost every other weekend. And so they've made a massive commitment to this sort of thing. So I want to just assure you that if that's a risk that you're willing to take, what I think you'll find is that you'll be changed by it. Your outlook will be changed by it. And you'll also bring, I think, hope and encouragement to people who sometimes feel like they've been warehoused and forgotten. You're in a position to come in and offer hope and encouragement and a connection and a demonstration that someone outside, from a different life experience, at least at that point in time, hasn't forgotten about them, really does care about them.
That's got to be a huge impact for everyone, like you going in to help and the people that are there behind bars.
Yeah,
How have you felt safety-wise?
The procedures are really, the procedures that the prisons have and the correctional officers have. They're looking at us like, they pat us down. They run us through scanners. They have us go through gates and everything like this. We have to go everywhere accompanied. So, it's not like they look at us as just, hey, we completely trust you. There's a little bit of, we have to be properly, wisely mindful of the fact that you might represent yourself as one thing and actually be another. But honestly, some of these guys that I've met in these prisons are some of the most mature and transformed people that I've met anywhere in life. And I would say another element of it that for me has been really beneficial is that, a lot of times we don't interact across ethnicities very well. And in at least in Illinois prisons where I've been, there's a very, it's a very mixed population of ethnicities. Let's put it that way. So as a result of that, the defining aspect of most of these men's experience isn't their ethnicity. Instead, it's where they are right now. And so to be able to come into that setting and really, I would say, have that ethnicity drop away in a time in our society's life where there's a lot of supercharged environment around ethnic differences, I think has been also I think it's a good step if more people were engaged in this to try to what's the word I'm looking for.
Well, I'm interrupting you, but I think it sounds like you're connecting as people. Right. Yeah, that's it. You're just people.
Yes, exactly.
Nothing else matters. Yeah. So that sounds wonderful, Erik. Thank you. I really enjoyed this segment of the high impact life.
Mm-hmm. Thanks.
To all our listeners, please first thank you for listening. We are on YouTube now, so please check us out on there as well if you'd like to watch versus just listen. And please give us 5 stars, subscribe, tell your friends. This has been another episode of the Retirement Lifestyle Show, and we look forward to speaking to you again.